Oi, fala aí pessoal, bom dia. Você está escutando o Inglês no Rádio. I am your host, Foster Hodge. This is your daily dose of English. Hey, what's up, guys? It's Foster from Inglês no Cru. We are back with a very special guest. Actually, our first guest on Inglês no Cru Rádio and our first repeat guest. So, a very special treat for me, and hopefully it will be a good time for you and for Anthony from GringoLingo. Anthony, how you doing?
Hey, I'm doing good. How are you? It's great to be back.
Very well. Yes, we're glad to have you back. Like I said, you're the first person to do Inglês no Rádio 2 times, which I don't know if that says more about you or about the show, but it's a pleasure having you back. Appreciate it.
It's great to be here. We could even call the episode Inglês no 2.
Ooh, nice. I like that. Fancy wordplay. So, Anthony, you are in Brazil right now. That's correct?
Yes, in São José dos Campos.
São José dos Campos, which is in São Paulo, if I'm not
Right.
mistaken.
Mhm.
Cool. Cool. I think most of our listeners are familiar with you or know most of your story, but you are primarily teaching English in Brazil, correct?
Right. Yes, I've done one or two Portuguese lessons, but it's almost all English.
Cool. So, something I really wanted to ask you about because I don't have any other avenue to express my frustration or just my thoughts or someone to talk to these things about in general is just kind of the day to day routine, a day in the life of an English teacher in Brazil. It's not what most people think. It's a lot of hard work, it's a lot of downtime. It's a weird life. So, could you, I don't know, just give us a little insight into how that looks for you?
Definitely. It's a lot of hurry up and wait. So, for example, I have some classes in the morning, but then during the day when everyone's working, I have nothing. And then I'll have class from maybe like 4 or 5 p.m. until 1 in the morning. The time difference changes between here and Boston. So the class will end at around 10 Boston time, but that's, 1 in the morning here. And then
Yeah.
I'll have class 7 the next day, or I guess technically the same day. And so it's weird because I'll end up sleeping like half the day, and people think I'm just lazy or don't feel like leaving the house. But really, I'm still adjusting. It takes a long time to adjust. Actually, I've been in Brazil a month already because I was in Boston half the year, but I'm still getting used to the time difference between here and there. And when there's a new class, I'm going to be up another 2 hours or so.
Yeah, we were talking about this earlier that I kind of compare it to the life of like a comedian or someone that works in show business or like a chef. Essentially, you're working when everyone else is off, which is a really weird dynamic.
hmm And there's the whole social media aspect too, and it's weird because when you're supposed to, in quotes, supposed to be posting, is when a lot of people are also out too, but then you're working, so you're in class, so you can't post and teach class at the same time. It's really weird.
Yeah, this is something that I always want to rant about, but I never have the space to. So maybe a public podcast is the good place to do it. We are not, at least I have the feeling that I'm not just an English teacher anymore. Now I'm an English teacher, a podcaster, a YouTuber, have to do stuff on Facebook, Instagram, all kinds of social media. And that's a ton of work. That is a lot of time and effort. I don't think most people realize that.
Definitely. I also think it's easy to think that we just want to be on social media and, I just do Facebook because we want to. But that's when it's a personal thing. People post photos that they take and they like of themselves or places. But as a business, it's not really because, that'd be fun to have an Instagram. It's because every other business has an Instagram. And if you want to make a name for yourself, you have to be active on all of these different platforms.
Yeah, it's weird. Make a name for yourself. That is an excellent phrase. Do you know how to describe that? Or you want me to take a shot at it?
Make a name for yourself.
I
I guess it's just
kinda like
making,
establishing yourself as like a reputable business, maybe? I don't know.
yeah. And also, I guess not having to define what that is. You know, if someone says, what's Walmart? You'll kind of look at them and be like, what do you mean, what's Walmart? Like, it's just so usual. It's even hard to describe what Walmart is. So to get to that level of recognition, I guess is not, not so big, but something in that area, in that direction.
Yeah, if I had a nickel every time people asked, like, "What's Inglês no cru?" Or even just like, "What do you do?" I'm like, "Ugh, here we go." Let me
A
try
lot
to
of,
take
a lot of people ask me, they're like, why is it GringoLingo? Like, oh, well, Gringo is foreigner, lingo is language, put it together and it rhymes. It's easy to remember. Yours rhymes too, so it's,
Yeah, when people ask why English no cru, most people either really like the name or they don't get it at all. And I'm like,
mhm.
honestly, uh, had the idea to start this business and we needed a name to buy a website. And it was just kind of what we decided on. I don't remember why or how. It's just sounded cool at the time, I guess.
No, same, definitely. It's pretty frustrating. It's kind of like, I guess it's a filter for for people who want to start a business and people who start. One of the filters is having a name, because a lot of people will get so wrapped up in trying to decide what to call it that it'll end up being more work to find that. And then they'll just be like, oh, we'll do it later. We have the name. We can work on it later.
Yeah, exactly. Speaking of your name, I just noticed, I guess last night when I was just doing a little bit of research on you, there's a podcast called the GringoLingo podcast. I don't know if you've heard this. Have you heard of this podcast?
I think I saw it, maybe it was 2 days ago. It was right after you actually texted me about coming on the podcast. I was trying to show one of the guys here that I'd already been on the show, and I saw this podcast, and I was like, well, looks like I'm not making a podcast. Someone already took the name.
I think it's a pretty new podcast, but I started listening to one episode. I don't want to talk shit about other podcasts on a podcast, but it was terrible. It was
Oof.
just like some dude talking about like how to get girls in Colombia or something, like speaking bad Spanish.
uh,
It was not enjoyable. So maybe you can, I don't know, try to sue them in court or something.
there's another Gringo Lingo on YouTube, and this is going to sound really irrelevant to bring race into the question, but like, I'm going to tie it all together. But it is another, um, I guess I would say, American of color, because apparently, like, I can't, according to a lot of Brazilians, I wouldn't be considered black in Brazil, but I guess, in the United States, if you're not white, you're black. Anyways, it's another black
Yeah.
American who teaches English to Brazilians, and his name is the Gringo Lingo, just to be different from mine. So that's fun. Trying to like send people the link and be like, "Oh, what's this? What's with your hair? Like, you got dreadlocks?" I'm like, that's not me. But it doesn't even look like
That's
me.
the other Black American gringo lingo.
Yeah, and
Oh, that's problematic. Yeah.
I only bring race into the whole situation because a lot of people just assume that I'm Brazilian, and I don't know if it's exactly because I'm brown. I don't know the right word for it. I'd say like moreno, but
Yeah.
you have other YouTube channels of white Americans who have an accent when they speak Portuguese too, and people just believe them right away. So I don't like to use being American as my only selling point, but it almost seems like when I try and use that to make a name for myself, to make it a point of difference for my classes, people seem to be hesitant when I say that, like, oh, you mean your parents are Brazilian though, or they try and find like an excuse for why I speak English and Portuguese.
Yeah, that's a weird, weird thing because I think in general, I mean, I don't want to generalize too much,
Mhm.
but Brazilians definitely have an affinity for gringos in general, I guess at least when they're learning English, and especially like the most stereotypical gringo you can imagine. I mean, I'm thinking of some of the famous YouTubers.
I
We
think I
don't need
already
to
know what you're
name
talking about.
names, but might as well. People like Gavin and Ching Explica. You can't get any more gringo than those gringos.
Yeah. I've had some people who have just like written on one of my videos before, or this was just one guy. He was like, oh, I hate when Brazilians go to the United States and pretend that they don't speak Portuguese anymore. Like, you're Brazilian and you got to be proud of that. Like, knock off the act. And I'm like, all right, I can definitely feel that. Don't forget where you're coming from. However, I'm not Brazilian at all. So I don't know if you're like attacking me or just venting your feelings because it's not me.
It's a subtle backhanded attack at you.
Yeah.
Yeah, I've gotten a lot in Brazil. People would ask if I was Portuguese from Portugal. I guess just because they can't place my accents, and it's like, oh, he speaks Portuguese well, but he sounds weird,
Hmm.
and he doesn't, like have blonde hair or like, like a lot of gel in his hair, and he's like, "Oi, galera, tudo bem?" So I'm put in this weird category of like, nah, definitely not from Portugal. Definitely, nope, nope.
I just learned like how to use this word, so like I'm super willing to use it now. It's like cognitive dissonance. Like people just they're like, no, there's not. Americans wouldn't come here. What are you talking about? Like you don't live here. You're visiting, right? It's not even an option for a lot of people when I tell them about my situation here. Like I just got my permanent visa, and so I'll show people when I swipe my credit card or something that I ask for a document. I'll give them that, and they're like, "What is this?" Like this is my document. They're like, no, you're AJ. I'm like, I don't have one. What do you mean you don't have one? Why are you complicating this? They're like, there's a line. This is the supermarket. Don't complicate things. I'm like, I'm not complicating things. I'm just not from here.
Yeah, it can be a really weird experience for probably people on both sides, I imagine, because Brazilians, you just present a weird case to them and they don't understand. Could you explain a little bit more about what cognitive dissonance is? What you mean by that? It's a phrase that I feel like I hear all the time, and I have a vague understanding of what it means.
So from what I learned from the internet, it's
You could say anything, and I would believe it. So don't feel pressured.
it's photosynthesis. No, I'm kidding. It's basically when what you believe of the world, like your expectations and what you see, it just doesn't line up. And you just have this weird feeling of like what's going on. It's a very unfamiliar situation. It's basically having your mind blown. If you see a dog meowing, then you'll probably have that moment of cognitive dissonance. Like, wait, dogs don't meow.
It's when something just kind of blows up your worldview and you can't handle it, so you just don't believe it. Is that
Yeah.
more or less it? Yeah, I feel like that's something most people have a fair amount of. I certainly do that quite often.
Especially when people hear my complaints or when I say like I don't want to live in the United States at the moment, and people are like, "What do you mean?" The United States is really good at pushing the message that they're the best country in the world, and I can say this: it's like an effective message because a lot of people believe it too. Have a lot of just blindly patriotic Americans, and then other people who think, "Oh, life's just better there here in Brazil." So when I say that I don't want to live there, they're like, "What are you talking about? It doesn't make any sense."
Yeah, I actually, just to try to give a real example, I recently was talking to my brother who's very well educated. He's been on the podcast before. He's a lawyer and well traveled. And he had recently traveled, I guess, to Argentina and Chile. And he was talking about the trip. He's like, it was so amazing. I loved it. But still, if I could live anywhere in the world, obviously it would be South Carolina. Like, it's the best place in the world. And I was like, really? I mean, is it? Yeah. I was just in Portugal and Spain. Those places were pretty cool too. Brazil's pretty awesome.
People will talk about like how it's well, but we have freedom in the United States. What do you mean by freedom? A lot of the freedoms that I see we have in the United States, I also see in Brazil. The only freedom that I could say is not as available in Brazil is the freedom to just go out and buy stuff. But that's not even freedom. That's more buying power and an economic side of things.
Yeah. So just full disclaimer for everyone, they're cutting down a tree at Anthony's house. So if you hear the chainsaw that I can kind of hear in the background, he's not also assisting in a murder at the same time while he's recording this show.
I cannot guarantee I have never assisted, but I am not currently assisting.
That's good. Well, English No Crew is not affiliated with any international murder scenes yet.
Yet.
He's just a podcast guest.